Let's get educated. That's why we're here, to bring you the stories impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses. It's time for a little education.
Well, hello everyone and welcome. I am Katie Patrick, joined by Mr. David Fiorazzo. Hey.
Hey.
It's Thursday.
It
so
is?
That's
right, it is.
That means we got some goodness on the horizon for you all today.
Time is flying, and that's right because it is Thursday, and we all know what time that is. If you've been watching this show for any length of time, it is time to check in with Mr. Alex Newman to see what story he has to share and how he can inform us this week. Hey, Alex.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, another one of those crazy stories. So a public interest law firm is exploiting a bunch of children to advance the goals of the climate change movement, to save the world from global warming. And they just won their first big court victory in the United States. This was in a state court in Montana. And potentially, we're setting the stage here for undermining the very economy and country that those poor brainwashed children are eventually going to depend on for jobs, food, energy, and the rest of their needs. Now, thankfully, their decision is going to be resisted. The Attorney General's office in Montana called this ruling absurd, and of course, he's right. But a lot more of this is expected. A little background on the case there. This was brought by a group called Our Children's Trust, and they filed lawsuits in every one of the 50 states asking courts to find that children have a right to a clean and healthy climate, and that fossil fuels undermine that right, and therefore government agencies have an obligation not to allow oil and gas exploration, at least without considering the alleged effects on the climate change. And so this far-left judge, Montana District Court Judge Kathy Seeley, ruled that, the state isn't allowed to just issue permits for oil and gas without considering the effect of climate change. She said this was unconstitutional. And again, this is the first ruling by an American court purporting to establish a right to not have climate change. In the ruling, the judge said Montana's emissions and climate change have been proven to be a substantial factor in causing climate impacts to Montana's environment and harm and injury. Of course, this is false. It is absolutely untrue. It hasn't been proven at all. In fact, I wrote an article about a peer-reviewed study that so far has been totally unchallenged that shows that solar activity can actually explain every bit of the observed warming that has taken place over the last few decades. Every single shred of it, 100% can be explained. Now, nobody has challenged this paper. There have been no peer-reviewed papers refuting this. It's written by some of the most preeminent scientists around the world. So for this judge to say it's been proven is an absolute lie. Either she's a doofus or she is being dishonest. Either way, her opinion deserves to be ruthlessly mocked. Now, the organization behind this lawsuit was really proud. They said that this is a huge win for youth, for democracy, and for our climate. Of course, if she had bothered reading the U.S. Constitution, Article 4, Section 4, she'd know that the U.S. government actually has an obligation to uphold the Republican form of government in every one of the states. So if it was a huge win for democracy, that in and of itself would be unconstitutional, since Montana has a guarantee of a Republican government. But in a statement, the executive director of this radical left-wing group, Julia Olson, said, as fires rage in the West fueled by fossil fuel pollution, today's ruling in Montana is a game changer that marks a turning point in this generation's efforts to save the planet from the devastating effects of human-caused climate chaos. Wow, that's a mouthful. Of course, to call CO2 pollution is simply preposterous. CO2 is the gas we all exhale. Your average human exhales about 2 pounds of it every day. It's the gas of life. It is not pollution. It is totally ridiculous. But this is going to be a major case, folks. The Associated Press wrote about it. Harvard Law School professor Richard Lazarus was quoted saying that this is clearly a major path-breaking win for the climate plaintiffs. Interesting. Now, they're doing this all over the world. Actually, the UN just put out an email, I got it in my inbox, where they are really proud of this idea of bypassing legislative bodies and elected representatives to implement their vision of climate tyranny. The UN Environment Program is openly promoting this. They say that these lawsuits are an integral part of securing climate action and justice. They say the number of these climate change lawsuits has more than doubled over the last 5 years, and it's still accelerating. And they actually say that these lawsuits are going to create a established, well-defined field of law, is how they put it. Inger Anderson, who I've run into many times at these climate events, she never wants to talk because, of course, why would you defend your wackiness when you don't have to? But she says climate policies are far behind what's needed to keep global temperatures below 1.5 degrees, as if she had any idea what effect reduced CO2 would have on the climate. She says people are increasingly turning to courts to combat the climate crisis and secure climate justice. Okay, yeah, right. So just 6 months ago or so, I was in Egypt at the latest UN climate summit. I had an opportunity to interview some of these climate youth, and they have no idea what they're talking about. It's a very, very sad situation. But they were demanding a ruling by the UN's Kangaroo Court, the International Court of Justice, saying that the UN must rule on this. They must give global guidance because climate change, the gas of life, threatens people's human rights. Folks, this is ridiculous. Adult Americans know this is ridiculous. In fact, the surveys show adult Americans do not believe the man-made climate hoax, but they're brainwashing our children. They're indoctrinating them in public schools to believe that the very gas they exhale is a toxic pollution. From a scientific point of view, this is ridiculous. It's totally ludicrous. But from a totalitarian point of view, it is brilliant. We have to resist this. We have to rein in these rogue courts, and we have to stop the indoctrination of our children in public schools. Thanks, guys.
Sharing the wrong Bible verse can get you 2 years jail time in Finland. Well, she was accused of a hate crime for sharing a Bible verse and her views on marriage and sexuality. A court in Finland upheld the right to free speech and dropped all charges in March, but now Paavi Räsänen, former Minister of the Interior, is on trial again. But the reason she spoke up in the first place might surprise you. Her own church jumped on the pride bandwagon at the time, and she thought they were going against the Bible they profess to believe in. I'm David Fiorazzo, and this is Christ and Culture. So back in March, a Finnish court concluded in a unanimous ruling that it is not for the district court to interpret biblical concepts, end quote. But on August 31 of this year, coming up, Dr. Paavi Räsänen, a member of Finland's parliament, will return to court due to the prosecutor's appeal in the case. Now, it's been a 4-year battle. This is what the God-hating left does here in the U.S. as well. They drag you into court and try wearing you down. But, by the way, the word bullying comes to mind. She did say they were trying to make an example of her, but she said she's prepared to defend herself in any necessary courts of law. Good for her. Räsänen said she's been encouraged by the international support that she's received, but is concerned that any ruling against her would reverberate throughout the rest of Europe. Watch.
That it is so important now to fight for these freedoms in Finland, and also in Europe they are following this, because in other European countries they have mostly similar legislations, agitation against minorities. So if I would be convicted, it would have consequences around to Europe, because the LGBT advocates, they are so active and aggressive, and they have very strong networks, and they are also on the background of this case.
It's interesting to me, all around the world, the LGBTQ lobby is so powerful, influential, and intimidating. As she said, they are, quote, active and aggressive. Question: what would happen if Bible-believing Christians were just as loud, demanding, and forceful, suing people that don't disagree with them? I think we all know the answer to that. But I also agree with her point that should she be found guilty, it would result in the open, legal persecution of Christians. Now, the bottom line is the truth of the Bible is, again, literally being put on trial. There's more to the story, however, because back in 2019, she posted on social media about the Pride event at that time and the Evangelical Lutheran Church's decision to support it. Describing her concern at the time, she said this, quote, "And it was a shock to me. And as a member of that church, I asked the leadership of my church, how is it possible that you are supporting something as a matter of pride, what the Bible calls shame and a sin? End quote. So this has also happened here in America, of course, where people have been arrested for sharing certain Bible verses. We just did a story on preaching in public last week. But in this case, she posted from the book of Romans. And after a citizen made a criminal complaint against her, her past statements that she made also came under scrutiny. After another complaint was filed against her regarding views on same-sex relationships, she expressed on a radio program back then, charges were filed, and Rosanen was then interrogated by police for 13 hours altogether, accused of, quote, inciting against sexual minorities, which would carry or could carry 2 years in jail or a fine. Now, she found herself sitting at a table in 2019 being questioned about her biblical views and the meaning of the book of Romans, simply tweeting Romans 1:24 through 27, which condemns homosexuality as sinful. She was charged with hate speech, violating the dignity and equality of the LGBTQ population. Now, even though the charges were dropped in March of this year, Finland's justice system allows the prosecutor to appeal. So you might be wondering if there are any protections for free speech and religion in Finland's constitution like they are in America. Yes, which is why she won the first court battle. But Rosanen admitted that the whole process has been like punishment and could have a chilling effect for Bible-believing Christians. She thinks her case is a warning to others to not speak about their faith, which is why this is so dangerous. She said, now, it is time to use these rights to speak and express your beliefs. What I have spoken or what I have written, it has been about similar things that Christians have spoken and have been teaching for decades, for 2,000 years, end quote. So remember, her dilemma was due to the fact that she was praying about how to respond to her own church supporting a Pride Month event, which she said was quite shocking to her. Now, many of her friends left the church, but she decided to stay and speak up and confront leadership. Now, I think this may be the greater point here, that some of our churches in America must be confronted on compromise, on conforming to the world, trying to please people rather than stay true to the Word of God. So it should be inspiring to us whenever a brother or sister in Christ, no matter where they are in the world, takes a bold stand on the solid foundation of God's eternal Word rather than on man's word. So Rosanen is an example of keeping the faith and having joy even in distressing circumstances. She said this whole process is in God's hands. And she said, quote, this has been a privilege and this has been my calling to fight now for these biblical issues. Amen. And freedom is one of the things we fight for, because without religious freedom and speech, the gospel and the truth will be censored and suppressed. God bless you, and keep speaking the truth about things that matter.
Today's show is sponsored by our friends at MyPillow. Save up to 66% on pristine quality bedding, towels, slippers, signature pillows, and much more when you use the code EDUCATED. That's EDUCATED, educated. Support this show and a great American company.
Hello, America. Welcome to One Nation. I'm your host, Dr. Jake Jacobs. Now, many of you have been regular watchers of the Jake Jacobs show, or the One Nation show. You know that I am very concerned about what's happening on our southern border. Some bad stuff on our northern border, but primarily on our southern border. I used to live in Arizona. I spent quite a few winter months in Arizona now, and I make a point of going to the border and connecting with a number of my friends who live down there. And what I'm telling you right now, there is an American crisis at the border, an American crisis at the border. And it's something that has a very deleterious effect upon the freedoms of Americans. And I think I don't think. I know that it's very important for us to be aware of what's going on and the lies and deception that are going on our southern border. So when I went down there, in fact, the year before I went down there on the border with a dear friend from Arizona Border Recon, and we saw the cartel, and my wife was with me. I got in trouble for actually bringing her along. It's a long story, but she was blown away at what she saw. The stories we heard about sex trafficking and all the fentanyl, the rainbow fentanyl that's been laced with Chinese drugs and things related. The stories of the sex trafficking, human trafficking coming, flooding up through the southern border. My wife couldn't believe it. And she would say to me over and over again, why isn't the media, mainstream media, covering most of this? And I said, because they are a part of the problem. So this last winter, we went down there with fixed TV, and we ended up visiting a number of friends. One gentleman by the name of Jim Chilton. He's an 84-year-old Arizona rancher. Has 50,000 acres near the border. He resides in Arivaca, Arizona, which is 8 miles away from the border. He has those 50,000 acres plus 5 miles of his property is right on the Mexican border. So Jim and his beautiful wife, Sue, he calls her Super Sue. She used to be a teacher in the inner city of Los Angeles. She's won all kinds of awards. She was, like myself, a graduate of Arizona State, and she majored in Spanish. And she worked with those, Spanish, Latino children and did a wonderful job. She's a wonderful human being. Well, Jim and his wife, Sue, had my wife and I and our cameraman, Scott, down on the border. He served us an incredible, beautiful steak. He's got over 1,000 head of cattle. And this 84-year-old Arizona rancher is profoundly concerned with what's happening. He's been actually speaking out for many, many years about what's been going on down in the southern border. He's testified before Congress. He's testified before a legislature in the state of Arizona. He's had cartel all over his property. He has evidence upon evidence of what's been going on with the coyote spies that are on his property, and they're actually strategizing on how they can bring through the human trafficking, the sex trafficking, and the drugs. We were even down there, and we saw cartel. I'll talk a little bit about that later. So we did an extensive interview with Arizona rancher Jim Chilton. We also, my dear friend, who's now running for the Senate in the state of Arizona, his name is Mark Lamb. Here's a book I'm holding up called American Sheriff, Traditional Values in a Modern World. He is the sheriff of Pinal County. Now, a little bit of Arizona geography. On the southern border, one of the big counties is Pima, which is predominantly the Tucson metropolitan area. And that's where I spent a lot of my time. Now, I went to Arizona State, and that is Maricopa County, where you know there was hanky-panky going on with the election of Kerry Lake that should have become governor. That's another story in itself. But sandwiched in between Pima County and Maricopa County is a elongated county, one of the fastest growing counties in America, called Pinal County. And Mark Lamb is the sheriff there. I've interviewed Mark Lamb on a number of my shows about how concerned he is about what's happening on the border and how Joe Biden and Mayorkas are lying through the teeth about this. He wasn't available when I was down there. He was out of the state. I think it was a sheriff's convention. And he says, Jake, I've got a lieutenant who's an expert on this. His name is Lieutenant Chris Lepre. It's funny because when I met Chris thought I was a left-wing, hardcore left-wing Jake Jacobs out of California. And he was a little kind of cold and distant to me, and I could feel it. And I was saying, giving a little bit of my background. He goes, you're not Jake Jacobs from California. I go, well, I used to live in California back in the 70s, but the fact of the matter is, I'm nothing like this left-wing Jake Jacobs, who I had known about before. And he said he thought Mark had set him up, that he was setting him up with some left-wing nut job that was doing a thing on the border. So the point is, we had a ride along with Chris. We confronted cartel. We saw empirical, factual evidence that destroys the lies of Joe Biden and Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security. We also interviewed Tim Foley. Tim Foley used to have a construction job in Phoenix, Arizona. And I met him many, many years ago when I was giving a speech down in Tucson. And he said that he had left Phoenix, was living in Arivaca once again, Arivaca, Arizona, which is 8 miles from the border. He's not too far away from Sheriff Jim Chilton of the same area. And he started what's called the Arizona Border Recon. And he sets up cameras all along the border. And he and volunteer friends, they assist people who have been harmed by the cartel, and they get them to the Border Patrol. And he actually is so smart with understanding the border. The Border Patrol goes to see Tim when it comes to finding ways throughout the southern part of the border. It's a sad fact that as Jim Chilton was telling me, and Tim Foley too, is the headquarters for the Border Patrol is in Tucson. That's more than an hour away from the border. So when there's illegal activity going on, whether it's fentanyl or human trafficking or sex trafficking, by time the ranchers or Arizona citizens are calling the Border Patrol and they're down there, in many cases, it's way too late. Guys, there is so much more to say, but for the rest of the story, watch the full episode of One Nation.
If you have a smartphone, tablet, Roku, or Apple TV, consider downloading the Freedom Project Media app. It's 100% free and includes all of our weekly shows, plus lecture series, archive programs, and award-winning animated videos for families like the Presidential Minute, Battles of America, and Heroes of the West. Don't rely on the social media giants to keep you informed. Simply download the Freedom Project Media app from your app store and allow notifications. And we'll let you know when a new video is ready.
All right, friends. So today, we're going to take a few minutes and examine a new movie that I'm pretty sure would have George Orwell running for the hills. It's called The Pod Generation. It's a new sci-fi film that's supposedly set in the near future, where things like 3D printed toast is a common thing. Katie, I don't 3D printed toast. I think I know what that is.
Well, it's also a time, more importantly, when women are the primary breadwinners. See, that's where the toast comes in.
That's where this is all going.
Men often stay home, and because of this new paradigm, the natural birth rate has plummeted. Women want to have it all, yet not sacrifice time to bring a child into the world the good old-fashioned way, which, you know. So the Womb Center is born. Let's take a look at this preview.
I've been having the strangest dreams.
Rachel, dreams are not reliable analytical material. That's so 20th century.
Hi, Rachel. We're delighted to let you know that we've had movement on our wait list.
We got a spot at the Womb Center. Oh, but haven't told Elvie yet.
Why, Rachel?
He wants a natural child.
But hold on, you put us on a wait list to have a baby and an egg.
No, it's not an egg.
It's an egg.
Women are reluctant to have children because it's not made convenient. We want them to pursue their careers and dreams.
We can't live in the past. I want to have a child with you.
Let's do it, Rachel.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm sure you're all very excited.
Parents are raving about it. It is the ultra solution.
My nephew was born at the Womb Center, but he doesn't dream.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Things are evolving.
Your family dynamics are about to undergo tremendous changes.
How can we make sure our baby's not bored in utero?
Oh yeah, we don't want any bored babies.
See, here's the thing.
Wow, that's just bizarre.
Yeah, I know you mentioned like George Orwell, but it's more like Aldous Huxley, because Brave New World, this is what it is, where you can make the babies be in a certain way. Are they the alphas or the betas? And they test tube babies and not having to deal with whatever comes with pregnancy and then obviously following. But it's said in the thing, a satire. I hope it is really quite satire, but it is going to be eye-opening, I bet, for people. And the thing is, some people may be on both sides of it, depending on how they interpret this movie.
Well, there are actually, there's science now that is allowing them to create babies in these pods and let them grow. And there's actually, sadly, that is very real what they're working on. But I noticed the little subtleties there. Like Katie, one of the men had one of these pods strapped around his neck and was carrying it. So one of the men was, I guess, having the baby because he had the pod. I don't know. But there's some parallels to what we're seeing, the conditioning, and there it is, the conditioning in our society today. There we go. He's going to be the man mom, and he's going to be at home working, and I mean, working at home as the mom, and the woman is the provider, and
yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm reserving full judgment
until you've seen it.
If I even see it, no, probably not. So I guess
then you have to read the reviews.
Yeah, no, that takes effort too. But it's having watched that, it conjures a lot of different thoughts, and so it'll be interesting to see people's reaction to it. How they're like, is this like women power, or is it like, hey, actually, women giving birth is the most magical thing you could ever possibly do, and to miss that experience because you have an egg and you're working, maybe it'll open the eyes of women to be like, it's our superhuman powers, every lady out there, so go for it.
It's a female director too, from what I understand, and it's
We'll see.
interesting in a sci-fi futuristic movie
but not so far
where
near
you see
future how it's
stuff
edited
that is so bizarre that you can hardly imagine taking place. That is something that you go, okay, that's just fantasy or whatever. There are a lot of very interesting things in that what we just watched that are not too far from reality. In fact, some things are being worked on and pushed now in that movie. So how did they describe it? Satire?
It says sci-fi satire.
Sci-fi
so
satire.
We'll see
I don't know.
the interpretation
Yes.
by everyone.
Yeah, warning.
Warning.
We'll put our warning label. Caution if you watch that. Our caution.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap up Educated for this week. I think both David and I learned a thing or two.
Always. Well, for Katie and myself, thanks for watching, listening, sharing, and supporting the show. And until next week, stay educated, America.